It was a regular Tuesday afternoon when I heard my daughter crying outside. Not just crying, sobbing, the kind of deep, painful sound that cuts straight through you. I ran to the front door and found her collapsed on the porch, clutching her prosthetic leg. Her face was red, eyes swollen, and she couldn't even speak at first. I looked down and saw what they'd done. The leg, the one we spent months getting just right, the one covered in the artwork she picked herself, was ruined. Thick black marker was scribbled across it, the words, "Follow rules," written like some sick joke. The bright colors she loved, the little stars and superheroes that helped her feel brave again, were smeared and scratched. Someone had even tried to strip the paint off with chemicals. You could smell it. Her badge of courage, the thing that gave her confidence to go out in the world again, was defaced like it meant nothing. She looked up at me with tears in her eyes, her voice barely a whisper. Why would someone do this? I didn't have an answer. Not yet. But I knew in that moment this wasn't just about her leg. This was about control, power, and someone trying to force my daughter to hide who she was to make them feel more comfortable. They didn't know who I was. They thought I'd stay quiet. But I had spent years fighting people like this. I may have left the courtroom behind, but I never forgot how to fight. They had no idea I used to be a civil rights attorney, but they were about to find out. My name is Michael. I'm a single dad, and for the past few years, my whole world has been about one thing: making sure my daughter Sophia is okay. Life wasn't always this heavy. We used to laugh a lot. She was the kind of kid who danced in the kitchen while I made dinner, who'd knock on neighbors' doors just to invite their kids to make up a play in the driveway. She was full of life, until everything changed. 2 years ago, we were driving home from her dance class when a drunk driver ran a red light and slammed into us. I walked away with a bruised shoulder. Sophia didn't. She was 12. I still remember her screaming, trapped in the crushed passenger seat, and me not being able to get to her fast enough. The doctors tried everything, but in the end, they had to amputate her left leg below the knee. The months that followed were some of the hardest I've ever known. She went through 3 surgeries, spent weeks in the hospital, months in physical therapy. She'd wake up screaming from phantom pain, reaching for a leg that wasn't there. And the worst part wasn't the pain. It was how it changed her. My loud, fearless little girl became quiet. She stopped leaving the house unless she had to. She wore long pants even in the middle of summer, just to hide the basic, dull prosthetic she'd been given. Her friends invited her to the pool. She said no. She dropped out of her dance classes, made excuses to skip birthday parties. Her school counselor called to say she was eating lunch alone in the library. At night, she'd ask me if people would ever see her as normal again. I didn't know what to say. Everything started to shift when we found a charity called Kids Steps Forward. They're not like hospitals. They don't just hand out prosthetics. They ask kids what they love, what makes them smile, what kind of leg would make them feel proud. For the first time since the accident, I saw a spark in Sophia's eyes as she talked to the team there. She told them about her favorite superheroes, her love for stars and space, how she missed feeling brave. They listened. And then they built her a leg that was more than just a medical device. It was bright, bold, and covered in everything that made her feel strong. It even had glow-in-the-dark stars. When she first put it on, she stood in front of our mirror, rolled up her pant leg, and just stared. Then she looked at me and whispered, "It's like wearing art. I don't have to hide it anymore." That night, she asked if we could go out for ice cream. She wore shorts, her leg was visible, and she didn't care. At the shop, a little kid pointed at it and said, "That's so cool! You look like a superhero!" Sophia smiled. For the first time in a long while, she smiled without holding back. And in that moment, I knew. We were finally getting her back. About 6 months after Sophia started getting back to her old self, I got offered a job promotion. It meant moving to a new city, but the salary would give us some breathing room, and the new place had one of the best school districts in the state, especially for kids with disabilities. I was nervous about uprooting Sophia just as things were improving, but when I showed her pictures of the new school's robotics club, she got excited. That was all I needed to see. We moved into a gated neighborhood called Oak Ridge Estates. On the outside, it looked like something out of a catalog. Neatly trimmed lawns, perfect flower beds, matching mailboxes, quiet streets. Everything looked polished and peaceful. The community was run by a homeowners association, the HOA, and at first I figured that just meant the usual stuff. Trash pickup schedules, lawn rules, that kind of thing. Our first real introduction to the HOA came at the new resident orientation. That's when I met Camilla Whitmore, the president of the board. She was in her 50s, sharp-looking, always dressed perfectly, with a frozen smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. When Sophia walked in wearing shorts and her bright prosthetic leg, I caught the way Camilla's expression shifted. It was quick, just a tightening of her lips and the smallest shake of her head. But it was there. Something about my daughter's leg clearly bothered her. Later, while Sophia was chatting with another kid, Camilla pulled me aside. "Just so you're aware," she said, all pleasant on the surface, "we do have certain aesthetic standards here. We like to keep things visually harmonious." I didn't get it at first. Then she waved her hand slightly in the direction of Sophia. "Medical devices should be more discreet." I stared at her for a second, thinking maybe I misheard. But no, she meant it. "Some neighbors might find it distracting," she added. I kept my voice steady when I told her that my daughter's leg wasn't breaking any rules. She smiled again, tight and fake. "Not exactly, but we do encourage more neutral colors in shared spaces." That was the first sign. I should have known right then. This wasn't going to be a peaceful place after all. Not even a full week after that awkward conversation with Camilla, we got our first violation notice from the HOA. It was about our lawn. Uneven edging was the reason. I stared at the piece of paper for a while, confused because I had just mowed the lawn 2 days earlier. I brushed it off, thinking maybe it was just how things worked around here. But then came the second notice. Our mailbox was apparently 2 inches too tall. Then the third. Our window blinds were off-white instead of pure white. A bird feeder we'd hung outside for Sophia to watch the birds. Too decorative. None of this felt random. The timing, the tone, the way each letter was signed neatly by Camilla. It was clear. These weren't real concerns. This was a message. Fall in line or get pushed out. Sophia started picking up on it too. At first, she tried to laugh it off with me. "What's next, Dad? Are they going to fine us for the color of our doormat?" But then her mood shifted. She stopped going outside as much. She wore pants again, even on hot days. I could see the same heaviness coming back, the one we worked so hard to lift. She didn't say it out loud, but I knew what she was thinking. Maybe her leg really did make people uncomfortable. That's when I started writing everything down. Every notice, every conversation, every date, every word. I took photos of our lawn, our blinds, even the mailbox. I didn't know exactly what I was going to do yet, but I knew we were being pushed, little by little, and I wasn't going to let it happen without a fight. Sophia had spent days getting ready for that HOA meeting. She was nervous but excited. She wanted to ask the board if the community could host a small fundraiser for Kids Steps Forward, the group that gave her the custom leg. She made a little poster, practiced her speech in the mirror, and even asked me to help her print out some photos of other kids the charity had helped. It wasn't just about money to her. She wanted other kids to feel the way she did when she got that first prosthetic. The pride, the freedom, the joy of being seen. When we walked into the meeting room at the community center, Camilla was sitting at the front table with the other board members. She saw Sophia's leg right away. Her eyes flicked down and then quickly away, her face stiff. I saw her whisper something to the woman next to her, Patricia, who nodded and gave the same tight-lipped smile. The meeting dragged on for about an hour with boring updates and budget talk. Sophia waited patiently, holding her little folder in her lap, eyes fixed on the agenda. When it was time for new business, she raised her hand. I gave her shoulder a light squeeze, just to remind her I was there. She stood up and said clearly, "I'd like to ask if we can do a fundraiser for the charity that helped me get my prosthetic leg. It would really help other kids like me." Before she could say another word, Patricia interrupted with a cough. "We already have our charity event scheduled," she said flatly. Sophia's smile faded a little, but she started to speak again, until Camilla cut her off completely. "And frankly," Camilla said, looking right at her, "we've had some complaints about your prosthetic." The room went silent. She went on like she was talking about someone's overgrown hedges. "The colors and designs are a bit much. Some residents feel it's distracting. This is a neighborhood with standards, after all." Then she pulled out some printed pages, new medical aesthetics guidelines that, until that moment, no one had seen. They said all visible medical devices must be neutral-colored and free of decoration. No superheroes, no stars, no color. I looked at Sophia. Her hands were shaking. Her eyes were full of tears, but she was trying so hard not to cry in front of everyone. She looked at me, and I could see it written all over her face. Is this really happening again? It was a quiet afternoon. I was working from home, expecting Sophia to come through the door like she always did. Maybe tired, maybe chatty, maybe complaining about homework. Instead, I heard crying. Not soft or quiet. It was loud, broken, and coming from the front steps. I ran to the door and found her there, crumpled on the porch, holding her leg like it had been ripped off all over again. Her prosthetic was ruined. The bright colors were covered in black marker. The words, "Follow rules," were scrawled across it like a warning. Parts of the paint had been wiped away, leaving smudges and raw patches behind. It smelled like chemicals. Someone had poured something on it, probably paint thinner, to erase what made it hers. Everything she loved about that leg, the designs, the stars, the little heroes, was destroyed. I pulled her into my arms. She couldn't stop crying. She didn't even speak, just pointed at the leg like she couldn't believe it either. I had never felt anger like that before. Not during the accident, not during the surgeries, not even at the HOA meeting. This was different. This was personal and cruel. As I was helping her inside, the doorbell rang. It was Dr. Freeman, our neighbor, and the only board member who'd ever shown us any kindness. His face dropped when he saw Sophia's leg. "I think I know who did this," he said quietly. That morning, he'd seen Camilla and Patricia at Sophia's school. They claimed they were dropping off lunch money for a relative, but they weren't anywhere near the front office. They were headed toward the gym, where Sophia had left her prosthetic during PE. Not long after, I got a text from Elijah, the quiet groundskeeper who always said hello to Sophia. He asked me to meet him at the community garden. When I got there, he showed me photos he'd taken through a shed window. There they were, Camilla and Patricia in the school parking lot, holding Sophia's leg. One photo showed a marker in Patricia's hand. Another showed Camilla wiping something on the leg with a cloth. "They didn't know I saw them," Elijah said, "but I couldn't stay quiet about this. Neither could I. That night, after Sophia had cried herself to sleep, I sat alone in the kitchen, staring at her damaged prosthetic leg. The words, "follow rules," burned into my memory like a threat. That's when the part of me I'd left behind, the lawyer, the fighter, came back. Before I became a full-time dad, before I switched careers to be home more after my wife passed, I used to be a civil rights attorney. I'd spent years going after schools, companies, and housing groups for disability discrimination. I knew the laws. I knew the system. And now I had a reason to use them again. I picked up my phone and made 3 calls. First, I called the police and filed a vandalism report. I gave them the photos Elijah had taken and explained what happened. Second, I called a former colleague of mine who specialized in ADA, Americans with Disabilities Act, cases. I asked her to help me file a federal lawsuit against the HOA for discrimination and harassment. Third, I called an old friend who worked at the local NBC station. I didn't need a story. I needed attention, the kind that makes people in power sweat. By the next morning, I had filed for an emergency injunction. That meant the HOA wouldn't be able to fine us or enforce their fake medical aesthetics rule while the case was being looked at. I also filed a restraining order against Camilla and Patricia, keeping them away from Sophia and our home. I wasn't just reacting. I was building something solid. Every letter, every photo, every threat, they were all now evidence. Dr. Freeman didn't hesitate when I asked him to give a statement. He'd seen them at the school and had no problem speaking out. Elijah agreed to talk to both the police and the reporter. Even a few neighbors, people who had stayed quiet before, started reaching out. One woman brought us cookies and whispered, "We've all been afraid of her for too long." It was all coming together. Evidence, legal backing, community support, and soon, public exposure. Camilla thought she was untouchable because of her title and polished manners. She didn't know I had the tools and the team to take everything she used to control people and turn it right back on her. The meeting room was packed, and the tension was thick as I stepped forward with a folder full of evidence in hand. I laid out the photos, copies of police reports, and witness statements for everyone to see. Every page told the same story. The marker, the paint thinner, the signature of Camilla on those notices, and the hidden pictures from Elijah showing Camilla and Patricia near my daughter's prosthetic leg. I could see the board members exchange uneasy glances as they realized something was very wrong. Camilla tried to laugh it off at first, denying any wrongdoing. She claimed that the photos and documents were a misunderstanding and that everything had been done in the interest of community order. But as I continued, her words started to sound weaker. I explained how her so-called medical aesthetics rule was nothing more than a tool to force my daughter to hide something that made her special. I pointed out the damages, the emotional pain and the cost of replacing her custom prosthetic, making it clear that this was about more than just rules. It was about respecting her, about fairness and human dignity. The room grew colder when Patricia attempted to back up Camilla's story with vague comments about community guidelines, but the evidence was undeniable. Just then, the door swung open and a police officer walked in, followed by a local news crew. The flashing lights and the buzz of cameras made it clear that this was no longer a private matter. I could tell that even some board members were starting to wonder what kind of trouble we were really in. Standing there with my voice steady, I laid out my demands. Camilla and Patricia had to step down immediately, and the HOA needed to scrap this unfair rule and replace it with one that respected all our residents. I also demanded that the HOA donate money to Kids Steps Forward, the charity that restored my daughter's smile and pride. I explained that I had filed an ADA lawsuit seeking damages for the pain and harassment we had endured. Every word was backed up by cold, hard facts, and the weight of the evidence made it clear that the wrong had been done. By the time I finished speaking, the silence in the room was deafening. It was clear to everyone present that the time for hiding behind rules was over. In that moment, I knew that justice was finally on our side, and I hoped that everyone there would remember that no one should ever be forced to hide who they truly are. Within 2 days of that meeting, both Camilla and Patricia had resigned from the HOA board. No big speeches, no apologies, just quiet exits. But the rest of the board knew they couldn't go back to the way things were. They voted to remove the medical aesthetics rule completely and, in its place, put in a real non-discrimination policy, one that actually protected people like Sophia. They also agreed to donate $50,000 to Kids Steps Forward, the same group that gave Sophia her first custom leg. A few weeks later, the charity surprised her with a brand new prosthetic. This one had a space theme: planets, stars, and a tiny astronaut floating near her knee. When she put it on for the first time, she spun around and laughed, watching how the stars caught the light. "It looks like me," she said, "like the strong version of me." And she was right. Something shifted in the neighborhood, too. People started saying hello more. Some even asked Sophia about her new design, and she proudly told them every detail. A few parents approached me about starting a support group for other families with kids who had disabilities or medical needs. Change didn't happen all at once, but it was real. Sophia began helping other kids through Kids Steps Forward. She even gave a talk at school about why her leg mattered to her, not just as a tool, but as a part of who she was. For the first time in a long time, she wasn't just surviving, she was leading. And the same community that once tried to make her small was now helping her shine. Looking back, I wish none of this had ever happened to Sophia. No child should have to go through that kind of pain just to be accepted. But the truth is, if they hadn't tried to break her down, we never would have had the chance to build something better. Not just for her, but for others too. She told me one night, "Sometimes bad things need to happen to make things better." And she was right. If you believe that no one should be made to feel ashamed for being different, if you think standing up matters, even when it's hard, then stand with us. Leave a comment, share your story, and if you want more real stories about everyday people pushing back against unfair systems, hit the like button and subscribe. Your support helps keep voices like ours heard. Thanks for being here.